When I was a kid and scared of something, my dad always told me not to fear ghosts. Fear the living, he'd say, because they can actually hurt you. His words stuck with me, especially when I found myself in a difficult time as a teenager. After my dad's suicide, I unexpectedly came into an inheritance. My mom and dad had owned a cabin near Mount Bachelor in Oregon, but after my dad's passing, my mom couldn't afford the payments, and renting it out didn't cover the costs. The cabin had already been put up for sale and was going to be listed within a month. During that time, it would remain vacant. Seeing it as an opportunity to escape, I decided to head to the cabin for a few weeks. I packed my snowboarding gear, grabbed my dog, Midnight, and drove up there in my dad's car. I figured it'd be a good place to clear my head after everything that had happened. For the first couple of days, things were fairly normal. The weather was cold, but I enjoyed spending time outside in the snow with Midnight. I snowboarded during the day, played video games, and drank at night, enjoying my solitude. The cabin, a 2-story building, had a living room, a small kitchen, and a side bedroom downstairs, while upstairs there were 2 more rooms and a balcony off the master bedroom. I spent most of my time in the main living areas, avoiding the unused rooms upstairs. I kept those doors shut and didn't think much about them. On the 3rd day, everything took a strange turn. I was playing games and hanging out with my dog at midnight when a heavy snowstorm started. Instead of hitting the slopes, I stayed inside. The snow piled up fast, and as I let Midnight out around midday, I noticed something odd. Fresh footprints were scattered around the cabin's yard, leading out toward the forest. Given that the other 2 nearby cabins were empty, I figured maybe someone else was renting nearby or shacking up for a few days. But the footprints led into the trees and disappeared, so I didn't think much more of it. Later that night, things started to feel off. I was lying in bed with my dog at midnight when I noticed him suddenly jump up, ears perked. He bolted downstairs to the living room, and I could hear him pacing back and forth, his claws clicking on the hardwood floor. I lay still in bed, trying to figure out what was going on. After a few minutes, Midnight ran back upstairs and started doing his usual "I need to pee" dance. I reluctantly got up and took him outside. Once we were outside, though, Midnight didn't want to relieve himself. Instead, he kept pulling on the leash, trying to drag me toward the same area near the trees where I had seen the footprints earlier. He kept sniffing the side of the cabin and staring up at the roof. After a while, he just sat down in the snow and stared into the darkness, his body tense. I thought maybe some forest animals had caught his attention, but I didn't want to chase anything. I pulled him back inside, and we went back upstairs. About half an hour later, I was lying in bed when I heard something that sent a chill through me. The sound of hooves walking across the roof. It was a series of 6 distinct steps, spaced apart as if someone was walking slowly and deliberately. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a pine cone falling from a tree, or an animal running across the roof. But the steps were too distinct, too spaced apart, like a person walking. Midnight, sensing something was off, ran to the balcony screen door, whimpering. I was a tough guy, or at least I considered myself one at the time. So I grabbed my coat, flashlight, and cigarettes and went out onto the balcony to investigate. I scanned the roof with the light. There was nothing there. The snow on the roof was undisturbed, with no tracks to indicate anything had been there. I started to feel a little silly, as though maybe I'd just been feeding off my own paranoia. I stood there for a while, smoking and looking at the stars. That's when I saw it. In a tall pine tree, about 10 feet from the balcony, something was crouched between 2 branches. It was a man, nearly 10 feet tall and unnaturally thin. Its limbs were long, pale, and its arms were stretched up, holding onto the branches above its head. Its mouth was wide open, there was no expression, no sound. It was just there, frozen in place. I stared at it, unsure if my mind was playing tricks on me. Midnight stood behind me, pacing and barking softly. The man didn't move. I was paralyzed with fear, but eventually decided to put out my cigarette. I thought about shining my flashlight on the creature, but something in my gut screamed at me not to do it. So, I backed up, pulling Midnight with me, and retreated into the room. Once inside, I locked the door and shined the flashlight toward the tree. The man was gone. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I tried to calm myself, reasoning that it had been some kind of hallucination or trick of the light. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. I pulled the curtains over the screen door, but as the night went on, I heard tapping at the door. Light, rhythmic tapping, like someone gently knocking with their fingers. It went on for almost an hour, and Midnight stared at the door, but he wouldn't go near it. I could feel it too, the sensation that something was on the other side, trying to get in. It was as if I was being invited to open the door, but at the same time, my dad's voice echoed in my mind. "Stay in bed. Don't open it." I listened to his voice, staying in my room, refusing to get up. Eventually, I passed out from exhaustion. When I woke up the next morning, I packed everything up and left the cabin in a hurry, never looking back.
For more videos, please subscribe.